he would make some comments. I feel like he would dream that there was a plane that landed on his legs. Like he started making a lot more reference to his legs and that they felt heavy, and he knew something was off, but he didn't understand what. And I must have told him at least 10 to 15 times. I would go through the story and say, you were hit by a bird, your motorcycle, went into a guardrail. Unfortunately, you lost your leg. And then I would continue, of course, to say, but it's okay. We're going to get you a prosthetic. You're going to walk again. But I had to repeat the story over and over again.
Welcome to Hey Chaplain. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. The purpose of the Hey Chaplain podcast is to bring real-life stories with hard-earned wisdom to the law enforcement community. From the LAPD to Scotland Yard, and sometimes from my hometown of Kansas City, the guests on Hey Chaplain are bringing you what you need to know so that you don't have to learn everything the hard way. And as a police chaplain myself, I want you to hear something positive and encouraging. Today we continue our interview with Pete and Michelle Tucker. Pete was a motorcycle cop in Canada who had a catastrophic motorcycle accident that took his left leg and put him in a coma. If you haven't heard part 1, it's really necessary for you to go back and listen to episode 148. This episode will pick up with Pete in the hospital recovering from the multiple injuries and the traumatic amputation, slowly working through the system to win back his job as a cop on the street. You need to hear Pete and Michelle talking about the losses and struggles because they are a fantastic example of a police couple who, together, survived the worst day possible. Here's Pete and Michelle Tucker. Your memories start back up after you come out of that coma, right?
Yes.
I mean, do they actually start the day you woke up, or is it sometime after?
No. What people need to, I didn't know this. What people need to know about a coma is you don't wake up and things are black and white. You wake up in a fog and you remember things in pieces. So, for instance, if you were one of my friends and you came to see me in the hospital, I might not know who you are. And then you come back and see me in a couple days and I'll go, I think I like him. I think he's a chaplain. Okay, yeah, he's a chaplain. And then a few days after that, I'll realize,
And again, we didn't know if it was actually the coma. We didn't know if it was the brain injury,
right,
medication.
Or the drugs. Like I was on a lot of painkillers.
So he says he actually doesn't really, from what we can gather based on what he's told me he remembers, it seems that there was at least 4 weeks following waking up from the coma that he only remembers very small parts of it.
And the coma was how long?
So the coma was 2 weeks. And then it was probably another 4 weeks.
So you have a month and a half that you just lost.
Well, 2 weeks of coma and 4 weeks of fog.
Yes.
I don't know what's going on. And what's interesting, I've told Michelle, is I may be off on these dates by a couple days, but basically I was at Sunnybrook Trauma Center for a month, and all together I might remember in my head 5 minutes of that month. And it's just pieces of things. And then they transferred me to St. Catharines General Hospital for 2 months to be closer to my family.
So here's my question, Pete. Did your understanding of your injuries, maybe specifically the loss of your left leg, did that happen during the fog, or is that something that you realized after the fog?
It happened during the fog, and it's hard to believe you don't realize your leg's gone. It's not instant like it should be. But I was in a fog, and Michelle tells me that she and my best friend James would tell me often my leg was gone. I lost it, and I'd forget.
I had to tell him over and over again, which was really tough. I had to keep telling him because I could tell that he was starting to realize, because he started to say things about take my boots off, or he would make some comments. I feel like he would dream that there was a plane that landed on his legs. Like he started making a lot more reference to his legs and that they felt heavy, and he knew something was off, but he didn't understand what. And I must have told him at least 10 to 15 times. I would go through the story and say, you were hit by a bird, your motorcycle, went into a guardrail. Unfortunately, you lost your leg. And then I would continue, of course, to say, but it's okay. We're going to get you a prosthetic. You're going to walk again. But I had to repeat the story over and over again.
Did it upset him each time?
It was actually not funny, but at some point, I remember when I told him, at one point, he just looked at me and he says, get my hat, get my gun. We're out of here.
Like I was leaving.
Yeah. I mean, yes, it did upset him, but almost more like it was kind of humorous because he didn't really acknowledge it. It was just get my hat, get my gun. We're out of here.
Yeah. Not accepting this. Yeah.
No.
It got to a point where the best way I understood it in my mind, in all the painkillers I was on and the brain injury, my favorite author is Tom Clancy. So in my mind, I remember telling Michelle I was flying a fighter jet and a chicken came through the windshield, and I've now crashed in a field and the enemy's coming through the jungle, but the plane is on my legs. Lift up the plane so I can get up. Wow. I had it all wrong, but I had the concept perhaps.
Yes, the details were there.
But I wasn't lining things up properly.
Right. Michelle, do you think that Pete mourned his injuries while he was still in the hospital? Did that come later?
It definitely came later. I think initially his body was just trying to get better. It wasn't until we had left the hospitals and we were home that life started to get really a lot tougher. Because when we were in the hospital, there was so much concentration on getting him physically healthier, I guess. Once we got home, and life was supposed to be back to some kind of normalcy, which it was nowhere close at that point. That was when the psychological healing had to start. And that was definitely the toughest time. And truthfully, it probably went on I always say now, it took us about 3 years before I felt like things were pretty much not back to what was before, but where I felt like, okay, you know what? Life is
it's the new normal, and
it's a new
healthy,
normal.
maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But the first year was tough.
Yeah. Pete is about as good humored about it now as you could possibly expect. I mean, I'm sure there have to be some people that are just uncomfortable with how comfortable Pete is.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
Right?
I think I must say, though, agreeing with you and Michelle that I'm comfortable with it. Those first couple years, I was not. I was not funny. I was not me.
Yeah.
I was very emotional. Like now I'm quite happy with who I am. But the first while, it's very difficult to process.
Although yes and no, because we gave talks. We used to give talks even after the first year. We started to do talks for the OPP, and we would get up and we would talk, and Pete would joke. So there was a part of him that was able to make jokes of it and accept it. But I think when we were at home, some of the mourning was absolutely still happening. I mean, to this day, obviously there is still a certain amount of sadness about certain things. But in general, yes, he's very well adjusted now. And that over time, there was healing that took place.
I think Michelle had some faith when I was healing, just glimmers of my personality coming through, even though I was not all there. But one thing she tells me about, I don't remember, but she tells me is the nurses put something on my bed that I was in, and I yelled out about my leg. But they put it where my leg wasn't, and I was just kidding. It came out in the coma that I'm making fun of the nurse for putting something on my leg, but it wasn't there. And she's like, okay, there's some of his personality coming out. And then maybe it disappeared.
The jokester in him definitely came out in the hospital. You could see parts of his personality that came out. So yeah, he was always in there, but it took a while for him to come back fully.
Pete, what have you lost because of the accident?
Nothing that matters. Nothing that matters. I mean, yes, my leg matters, and yes, I'd like my leg back, but it's not going to happen. I lost my leg, and it changed my life a little bit, but it didn't make things worse. I still have my wife. She's great. I still have my kids. They're successful. They're great. I got back on the road with my gun and a prosthetic leg for a while before I decided to take a different job. I feel like a jerk if I say I lost anything, because my life is still good. Nobody else is hurt. And I've learned to manage. Again, I'm not downplaying that I lost my leg. That's bad.
What have you had to give up? What have you missed?
I can't run. Not that I ever liked running, but I physically can't run fast enough. My mechanics don't work.
Yeah, because it's an above the knee amputation.
I can walk, but I can't run. I'll be honest, I don't like working out, but I do work out because Michelle thinks that'll make me live longer and I'll recover, and it got me back on the road. I can't swim because my leg is too heavy, but I never really used to. But I can go in the ocean, I can go in a pool, and I can stand in the water and I can do those things. I just can't swim lengths anymore, but I never used to. So that's kind of why I say I didn't really lose it. I can still drive. I've learned to adapt my movements to get jobs done. Like if I'm building something in the garage or I need to get up on the roof, I just do it slower.
When you first came home from the hospital, Pete, how much help did you need?
I needed a lot of help because I thought I needed help. Mish took the garbage out for a year because I thought that was too hard.
That was actually a big adjustment. Actually, that's actually an interesting point, because what he just said about how he thought he needed help, Pete's confidence was completely diminished after the accident. And he didn't believe he could do anything at the beginning. I mean, and in the beginning, I mean, he would ask for help to get his tea mug that was on the counter, a foot and a half away. And he would ask for help for everything, which, to be honest, as a family was really tough. And for me, I did have to say to him a few times, no, you can do it yourself. And we sort of had to, I hate to say train that back, but we really did. We had to say, no, you're capable. And eventually he did start doing things like cutting the grass again and shoveling the snow or going out with the snowblower, and, things that maybe some people, neighbors probably thought, why is Pete doing that? And part of my thing is actually, I'm a little bit of I don't know what the word is.
I can't say the word.
We can't say the word. Yeah. But to
Michelle is tough.
To put it in perspective, I was bringing weights into the hospital when he wasn't even sitting up straight, because my feeling was, why should your upper body become atrophied just because you've lost your leg? You should keep, we want to get you stronger. Here are some weights, start doing the work. And that has always been my sort of push, or my feeling. So I think after the accident, when he was really having a hard time, I was like, okay, no, we're going to go to the gym. We're going to go for walks. And if you don't feel like it, I'm sorry, but you have to do it anyway.
Pete, did you know years ago that you married your personal trainer and physical therapist?
Well, she's actually my high school girlfriend. And I got to be honest with you, I am not the reason I became independent again. I am not the reason I got my confidence back. Michelle, and sometimes annoyingly, because I was not in a good place, would drive me to do things to make me independent again. Now I do them myself now, but I needed that kick in the pants to get going. And I think one of the things I'm proudest of that I taught myself again, I have a 5-liter standard Mustang, 1986 Mustang, and I've had it a long time, 28 years, and my left leg is gone and it's standard. So that's my clutch. So basically, one day I just made a contraption with some zip ties so that my foot didn't fall off the clutch, because it will fall off and I don't know. And I just left the house in the car, and my wife and one of my sons was looking outside and saw me drive away. And basically I learned to feel the clutch in my groin instead of in my foot. I just rewired my brain.
A lot of guys do that.
But I was able to drive the car and not stall it. And that was a big goal for me.
Yeah.
Getting back to your question initially, when you said, I actually find it really interesting to hear when you asked Pete what he lost, and he said, essentially, he didn't lose anything. I find that actually really interesting, because I'm glad to hear him say that. Initially, when he first lost his leg and I would talk to him, I would say to him, Pete, it's okay. We can still travel. We can still do this. We can still do that. We're just going to do it a little bit slower. So like if we're going to go traveling, maybe we can't walk quite as far as many miles as we used to. We'll just have to stop at the wine bars along the way and take some more breaks. So that was always my attitude. And I'm really happy to hear. I knew he had taken that on, but it's interesting to hear years later that he would say he doesn't feel like he lost anything, because honestly, I did. I thought what was really important to me was that I thought we're never going to walk on a beach together again. I thought because Pete had a hard time walking on sand. That really bothered me because I love walking on beaches and I love vacations and the, sun and the sand. And we have walked on the sand since then, things like that. Like we can do it. It's not necessarily going to look the way it used to. It's going to be a little bit slower, maybe a little bit different, but we can make it work for us.
I just want people to know I got here. I got here because she pushed me. And I sometimes don't believe I'm where I am because going back 12 years ago in my mind, there's no way I was ever getting here. But all you can do is try and see what happens. And so I have no complaints.
And you have someone who loved you enough to give you tough love.
And vice versa. He was willing to accept it and do it even when he didn't want to, because I was asking him to.
Well, actually, in the hospital, she asked me, because I lived, if I wanted to get married again, and I was on a lot of drugs at the time and I wanted to know what my options were. So I asked to who. I didn't know who she was, but she wanted to renew our vows. I figured out later. So,
yeah.
so we did. Yeah.
So one of the losses that happen when a police officer is injured is the loss of their identity, who they see themselves as, because a lot of injuries lead to end of career. So surely at some point you were seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. We're going to be able to leave the hospital. We survived the pneumonia and the terrible surgeries and everything else. But now what? What was the plan initially? What did you think you would end up doing, and how did you recover your law enforcement career?
I think your point is valid. What now? But I got to tell you, it makes no sense. But I never thought I wouldn't get back on the road again. Really? It doesn't make any sense. And everybody supported me, and I'm sure some of them thought he's crazy, he's just talking. But I truly believed I would get back on the road again, and I did.
And actually, on that note, it's funny because who did not have a brain injury and was much more aware of the situation at the time, I still remember, you have to fill out the short-term disability forms, and then you have to fill out the long-term disability forms and all of that stuff. And I remember talking to an administrator on the phone because she was going to walk me through some of this. And I had just done the short-term disability, and she said to me, okay, and then in a little while, we're going to send you the long-term disability since Pete will be off. And I said, oh no, Pete's going back to work. Yeah. And I still remember, I think this woman must have hung up the phone and thought, this woman I just spoke to is crazy. Her husband just woke up from a coma. He has no leg, and she thinks he's going back to work as a police officer. Like, is she nuts? But it never occurred to me that he wouldn't go back in some capacity. I didn't think he was going to go back on the road, but I knew he would be a police officer again in some capacity. So
now,
I think
this was in mid 2014.
Yes.
And in that same time frame, give or take a few years, there are Afghanistan and Iraq military veterans who had been amputees who returned to active duty. Were you aware of those stories, or were you doing this just?
I think we were just doing it. I think I was just doing it because we knew Pete, and we knew that he always wanted to be a police officer. He was going to be a police officer in whatever capacity that meant. He would go back to work, and also I knew he was not going to sit at home and sit in the house and do nothing all day. I'm like, no, that's not who he is. And frankly, I don't think I could deal with that. So he would annoy me too much. So I was like, no, he's going to be working in some capacity.
I knew of those soldiers later who returned to active duty, but in a completely selfish way. I was in my own world and not paying attention to anything. I just knew I was going going to go back. And I think now I wouldn't believe myself. If I could talk to myself then and now, I wouldn't support myself going back. But I got my gun back. I went on patrol. And really, the only thing I can't do is run. But most people don't know that.
Right.
And we got 20 feet of length on the taser anyway. So you got to get 21 feet away before.
And,
when and how did the agency get on board?
That was quite a long process. So they were wonderful in terms of him wanting to go back administratively. So like in the beginning, they were absolutely fantastic about having Pete go back in an administrative position. And he had a number of positions, and they actually put him in some, hoping that they would be positions he would like, such as...
Well, they put me into the detective unit for a while. And as much as I appreciate detectives, it was not my thing. They thought they were giving me the golden ticket, putting me in this detective job, and it was not for me. Then they assigned me to the coroner's office as a coroner's constable. Again, for some people, that's a great job. I had an office in Toronto, a car. Was not for me. The OPP I never feared missing a paycheck. I never feared missing any of my bills. They prorated all my vacations so that I could take it whenever I wanted. They were fantastic, but I wanted back on the road. And essentially what happened is they kept giving me tasks to do, psychologist appointments, physical tasks. They kept giving me stuff, and they'd give me 3 months to get it done, and I'd get it done in a week and send it to them. And I think it finally got to the point where they went, we've asked this guy to do 30 things and he's done them all. It's probably just easier if we let him go back to work.
Right. Well, and he did have to keep proving himself. Like the thing is, I think in the beginning they were like, we can have him do administrative work, but they didn't really want him back on the road because, of course, they were worried for good reason. But when he kept completing all the psychological and all the physical, and they kept giving it to him over and over again, it got to the point they said to him, well, be careful what you wish for, because they might actually put you back on the road. And Pete was like, yes, that's all he wanted. And in fact, when we talk about identity, it wasn't until that point, which was 3 years after his accident, when he went back on the road and had his firearm back, that all of a sudden the Pete that I knew started to return. Because all of a sudden he knew he was back where he wanted to be. His confidence returned. And again, he may have been a little bit slower, not quite the same, but that's when his identity started to really come back.
See, and that's a valuable lesson, because I worry that a lot of the decision makers may themselves be eagerly looking toward retirement. And they feel like, well, if I can gift that to someone else, that's surely what they want. And that's not always
not at all.
So sometimes the best thing you can do to help that officer be healthier is to let them go back to work.
Yes, absolutely.
That is an excellent point. And nobody in the OPP was trying to hurt me. They all thought they were giving me a gift.
Right.
But it's a gift I didn't want. And a perfect example for your listeners about taking matters into your own hands and getting things done is my inspector called me and said, okay, we need one more psychological test at this guy in St. Catharines, where I live. He goes, you got to book an appointment with him. It'll take a few hours to do it. But he goes, we need his report within 6 months. We want to timestamp it for that. So they gave me the phone number and the doctor's name. I phoned the doctor. I got his secretary on the phone, explained who I was, asked if I could speak to the doctor, and he comes on the phone. And I said, listen, I don't want insurance. I don't want to retire. I don't want you to write me a note that says I can't work anymore. I want to come in. All I want you to do is say I'm okay. He goes, all right, well, come in tomorrow. So he books me for this appointment, and he's talking to me. He says, so tell me your story. I said, all I want to do is work. I just want to get back on the job. I don't want any treatment at all, nothing special. And he goes, well, okay, let's do these tests. So I think I did about 2 hours worth of tests. And he said, okay, I'll write this up. And I said, okay, when will it be written up? He goes, oh, probably a month. And I said, all right, doc, a month is fine if that's your schedule. But really, you're all that's stopping me from going back to work now. He goes, okay. And within a week, I had the report and I handed it in. I went back to work. Yeah. But I could have skated. I could have retired. I could have quit.
Michelle, do you ever feel angry that this happened to you guys?
No. No, I don't actually. I mean, sometimes I might feel sad about some of it. You know, the things that maybe we can't do the way we used to. Like there might be some sadness there. I don't really think angry maybe this much, like just a tiny bit of anger. And that probably would be around the whole motorcycle thing. Cause I think, I never really liked motorcycles. So there's probably a very small part of me that thinks, oh, what if? But no, in general, I would say our lives, I don't want to say they're better for it, but I will say because we've come out on the other side and we've grown, and our son actually now, originally he wanted to be a police officer. He's now in his 4th year of medical school.
Oh, wow.
Because he's going to be a doctor. And I really think that probably came from Pete's accident and, him recovering and everything that happened there. Like, it's amazing how it affects other aspects of your lives. And, the other side of it is, over the last 12 years since Pete's accident, we have told our story on many occasions, and it's been amazing how people have responded to that, and how many people I hope that we have helped, that we've heard that we have helped by hearing our story. And I will say there's something good that has come out of that. So, obviously I'm not happy this happened, but I think there's a lot of good that has come from it.
How did you guys avoid bitterness?
I think somewhat to answer that question, and maybe Mish can do a better job, but something I want you to understand as well. People will ask me, and you asked her about being angry. People will ask me if I would change anything about the day of the accident. And shockingly, the answer is no. I wouldn't change anything. Because when you change one thing, life changes forever. So if I changed the day of that accident and I didn't have it, and I still had my leg, maybe because things were different, heaven forbid, Michelle would be in a car accident a month later and I'd lose her.
Sure.
I wouldn't change anything because it happened, it's done, and I'm now in a place where I'm happy and I'm content, and I might not be here if that event didn't happen. That's kind of what keeps me going.
Yeah. It's called not knowing the counterfactuals.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's interesting in terms of bitterness, or, did you ask how are we not bitter?
Yeah.
And I don't know. Honestly, I think a lot of work. I think, like I said, the first 3 years following in particular, those were absolutely the toughest times in our marriage. We were always okay. We never had any.
I thought we were great. She thinks just okay. I'm learning lots today.
There were lots. No, it was definitely a hard time. But honestly, I think having grown together through it, and really, I think doing these talks was therapy. Like in the initial stages, it was a form of therapy, talking about it all the time. It really was a form of therapy for us. We did actually learn quite a bit from each other in doing the talks. So that was interesting.
What recommendations can you make? Because there's a lot of cops who've had injuries. They've had commanders and administration giving them stuff they don't want. There's been strain on the family, especially in the marriage. What can you recommend to help with that?
I would say decide what you want to do and decide what you're good at and do it. Even if people say you can't or they get in your way, administration rules. And I would like to say I've had a lot of good jobs in the OPP, but all I wanted to do was get back on the road in uniform and go on patrol. And many cops think that's the lowest rung on the ladder, and perhaps it is. But I was good at it, and that's all I wanted. I sometimes think administration was trying to give me higher rungs, and they finally went, all this guy wants is to get back on let's just be done with it and get it done. Yep. Don't let people stand in your way. Find out what you want and you're good at and go for it.
And the other thing I would say that was incredibly helpful is we had unbelievable support. We had support from our friends. We had support from the OPP. We had support from our church. We had absolutely incredible support, and we used that. We definitely embraced that and weren't afraid to lean on them in the time of need. We had unbelievable support, so that was extremely helpful. The other thing is counseling. Following Pete's accident, a few years after, both of my parents died in the same year. And so between Pete's accident and that, I got to a point where I was like, okay, you know what? I need to go to some counseling. And so I started that, and I've continued it. I even just for check-ins, I don't do it regularly anymore, but I do go and just sort of go in for check-ins every couple of months. And I think that counseling has been very helpful in terms of helping to put things in perspective, sometimes just helping me to vent when I need to. And having that outside perspective or help definitely has made things better as well.
I dropped her off at her counselor one time, and I found it odd that the office is in a bar, but I didn't go in. So
Pete also had counseling, actually, real counseling at some point early on, but yeah.
I've heard that you can always win a bet in a bar. Can you tell me about that?
I have this gag I do where I bet the waitress I can balance a bottle of beer on the bottom of my left foot without spilling it, and they'll take the bet every time. But they don't know my leg's artificial. And also because my leg was severed above the knee, my hamstring's really irrelevant. And I can get my left leg up just 180 degrees from the floor and balance a beer on top. And I always get a free beer that way.
Yeah. All right. So a lot of state troopers in the United States, sheriff's deputies in remote areas where they have to work by themselves, backup is several minutes away. They don't get in as many fights because they learn to talk their way through stuff. You have to have been concerned about your ability to take somebody on. If you had to put hands on somebody, you had to be concerned about basically your foundation. What was your thought process about making an arrest, dealing with somebody that might want to fight you?
Well, I was a long time on the job then. I was probably, I was 20 years on the job then. So yeah. I reached a certain level of maturity where I'd rather talk my way out of something than fight my way out of something. But I also had to have confidence in my abilities. And I was a high school wrestler, and I'm most confident on the ground. People say you're losing if you're on the ground. I disagree. I was a wrestler.
You felt like you had the advantage there.
Yeah, I like being on the ground. And my attitude always was any kind of confrontation, we're going down because I'm best on I don't have to worry about my leg then. Yeah. I'm best. But I have the tools and I had the vocabulary, and I think I had the attitude that I wasn't really worried about it. I wasn't going to get in a confrontation that I'm going to lose. I will let you go before I get into that confrontation. But I remember the very first time I got behind a stolen car, and the OPP is a little bit like your state troopers. Like backup is not close.
Yeah.
There's city cops and stuff, but I get behind a car and it's stolen and I confirm it, and my backup's like 10 minutes away. And I realize that I'm going to have to do something on my own. So these guys get off the highway, and they come to a traffic light, and I just pull right in front of them and lock them in, and I get out and I convince them not to go anywhere. And there's 4 of them. And I have the upper hand for sure. I'm not going to use it.
Yeah.
It's just for show, but they're not going anywhere. So anyway, the city cops show up, and I know who they are. They show up and they take them into custody because it's the city. And the first cop says to one of the guys, "Why didn't you run?" And the 4 guys go, "Well, he had us dead to rights. He had us." And it was a friend of mine. He says, "He's got one leg. You should have run." And they didn't know. So that was the joke that I...
Well, it does say, too, about how naturally you must have been moving, that it just didn't, there wasn't enough of a clue that they thought you couldn't have run them down.
And they're distracted. They think they're in a world of hurt, and they're not paying attention to details.
Yep. Their anxiety and your bright lights play into your favor. So have you ever threatened to use that leg as a weapon?
No, although what I did want to do, and they wouldn't let me, is I wanted to put a round through my leg. I have extra legs. I wanted to put a round through my leg at the firing range for an accident and have people panic and just go, So, but they said that would cause too much trauma.
Pete and Michelle, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking today.
Well, thank you. We really enjoyed it. I've been looking forward to it for a while.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you so much.
I want to thank Pete and Michelle for coming on the show and telling their story. I first heard their story in New Orleans, Louisiana. I was at an International Association of Chiefs of Police meeting, and they were keynote speakers at the wellness conference. They did such a nice job of telling their story, and their story was so compelling I knew I needed to invite them on the show, and I'm grateful that we were able to work it out just a few months later. Of the many parts of their story that I truly appreciate, one that really resonates with me is the power and value of a strong marriage in the moment of a catastrophe. But you don't know when a catastrophe will come. So do the work now to build up the strength of that relationship. In regard to this podcast, the best thing you can do for Hey Chaplain is to take a moment and tell someone else about it right now. Grab your phone and text a friend and say, "Hey, I just heard a great podcast and I want you to listen to an episode." Or 2. Or maybe 100. We can be flexible on the number. But podcasts grow because people share them. Let someone know about Hey Chaplain today. The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guest and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. If you like this episode, please share it with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening to Hey Chaplain, and as always, let's pray for peace in our cities.